Hey guys, welcome back. Fishing 101 The Basics, and today it's all going to be about fishing line. So stick with me. Okay, fishing line. We're going to talk three types of fishing line. We're going to talk monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid. Let's start with monofilament. Now, let's be honest. If you could spend your entire life fishing 8 or 10 pound monofilament, you'd probably be perfectly fine. It's when you start getting into some specifics later is where fluorocarbon and braid really come in, and we'll get into that in just a second. But plain old monofilament, I spent most of my life throwing that. And again, you'd be probably perfectly fine with it. The key is on monofilament. One, it floats. And two, it's got a lot of stretch to it. Now, the stretch can be a problem when you're fishing soft plastics like plastic worms or creature baits, because you need to push that hook up through that worm. And when you're trying to set a hook, if you got a lot of stretch in the line, that doesn't help too much. So that's a bit of a disadvantage on the monofilament, but it doesn't cost much. It'll catch fish. Fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon basically is almost like monofilament, only they took the air bubbles out so it sinks instead of floats. And fluorocarbon won't stretch the way monofilament does. I have 2 reels set up with fluorocarbon. Those 2 rods are specifically used for square bills, chatterbaits, deep diving type crankbaits. If I'm fishing a square bill that's supposed to go 5 foot deep, I want to get it to 5 foot deep, and fluorocarbon, because it sinks, gives me a better chance of getting the lures down to the depth where I want to fish them. So that's why I tend to use fluorocarbon for those. Now, braid is another thing entirely. Braid has zippo stretch. You're not going to get any stretch with braid. That's why a lot of people like to use it when you go set hooks on soft plastics, jigs, frogs, whatever. When you want to set a hook, you're going to set a hook because there's not going to be any stretch in the line. Now, another advantage is, in the last couple of years, I've seen Bob has switched over on his open face spinning reels, and he's now using braid on that with his ultralight. Now, the nice thing about that is monofilament and fluorocarbon have a memory. You'll see that line come off in the coils. Braid does not have memory. So it's really nice for those open face spinning reels. When the braid comes out, it's straight. You won't get all the coils with it. If braid has one drawback in this, is in Bob's case, he's usually throwing ultralight, real small 32nd ounce jigs or stuff like that. Braid tends to be affected by the wind more than the monofilament would or the fluorocarbon. So sometimes the wind can cause you problems casting real light stuff with braid. Otherwise, it really works well for those open face spinning reels. Now let's get down to how I use braid. And I'm going to use it a little different. If you watch enough videos, you've seen guys talking, they 50, 60, 70 pound braid or whatever. I don't do that. I use 20 pound braid, and here's why. I like, and Bob likes, high visibility braid. First, we can see the line. The eyes get a little old, they get a little harder to see, but with high visibility, you can see it. Most braid is green or whatever color it is. Our high visibility is bright yellow. Now, it doesn't have much of an effect if you're fishing frogs, because you don't worry too much about it there, but the braid helps in frog fishing. Just again, there's no stretch when you're setting the hook. The high visibility comes in big when I'm fishing jigs or soft plastics like plastic worms and creature baits. And the reason here is you'd be amazed how many times you can see the strike before you feel it. There are so many times you'll sit and you'll watch your line going sideways. You don't feel a thing, but you'll see your line going sideways and you know somebody's taken off with it, and you can set the hook. So that's why we love high visibility. It allows us to see those strikes before we feel them. We feel we're going to get more fish that way. Now, if you're using high visibility, guess what? You need to use a leader. So what I usually do is when I'm using 12 pound fluorocarbon on my bait casting reels, for the crankbaits, I just take whatever's left over and I use 12 pound fluorocarbon, and I put a 5 or 6 foot leader on the high visibility braid. Well, if I'm going to use 12 pound fluorocarbon for a leader, why do I want 50 pound braid? The leader's going to break first anyway. So that's why I just stick with 20 pound braid. It does good enough for me for everything I'm doing, and I'm always using the leader, so it really doesn't make any difference. Now I suppose one thing we probably should do, if I'm going to tell you that, is show you how I tie the leader to the line. So let me show you that real quick. We'll get into how I'm tying the leader on so you know how to do it for yourself. All right, here's our two types of fishing line. This is going to be our braid, and this will represent our leader. So basically what you do is overlap them like I have here. We're going to take this braid and we're going to bring it back around in a loop like this. Going to set it just like that. And at this point in time, you now wrap this about 5 or 6 times, and we're wrapping it around both the leader and the braid. That's probably enough right there. So as you can see, I've wrapped it over, and then we kind of pull that up. And now we're going to take, we did that was the braid. Now we're going to take the leader and we're going to do the same thing. Make a big loop again, just like we did before. And again, we're going to wrap this usually about 5 or 6 times. Wrap it around both. There we are. And you tighten that up. And we have them both tightened up. When we get them all tight, you pull in here. You tighten each knot down. So we get that knot tied down. And you get this knot tightened down. And we have this knot tightened down. And now when you pull the two, they'll come right together. And boom, there you go. Now all you have to do is cut the tag end off of each one of these. And you now have your main braid tied to your leader. I believe that's called a double uni knot. That'll get your leader and your braid put together. So there we go, guys. 3 types of fishing line: monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid. Those will cover you for pretty much all the bases, so if you got to go out and get a new reel, now you know what kind of line you want to put on it. Thanks for sticking with me. Hey, subscribe to the channel if you would. We'll see you again next week.